Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. Early voting is underway, and in just over a week, Nashvillians will be heading to the polls to elect new leaders for our city government. The election has been getting a lot of attention, but there's one race on the ballot for a position that tends to fly under the radar of many Nashvillians: vice mayor. How many of us actually know what the vice mayor does? If you aren't quite sure, we've got you covered. Today's show is a Citizen Nashville episode all about the vice mayor. Later in the hour, we'll talk with the candidates, incumbent Jim Shulman and council member Angie Henderson, and ask them why they are fit for the job. But first, we're going to kick off the show by learning more about the job itself. And who better to talk about that than a former vice mayor? Howard Gentry served as the vice mayor from 2000 to 2007, and he's currently the Davidson County Criminal Court clerk. He's also joined by WPLN's interim news director, Tony Gonzalez. Thanks to you both for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So
great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you both again. Let's run through it for those who are not really super familiar with it. Tony, tell us, what are the responsibilities of the vice mayor?
Yeah, I love this question because you either know or you don't know. Mm-hmm. And most folks probably don't know what the vice mayor does. But if you've ever gone to a council meeting or watched one on TV or covered one like we do as reporters, then the vice mayor is this really important person. Their main job they're doing is running the Metro Council meetings twice each month. So they're sort of making sure that the process is flowing at those council meetings. There's lots of other things they do as well, though. The vice mayor assigns council members to committees, which are smaller groups that kind of really dig into the proposals that the council's considering. Vice mayor can also call special meetings. Recently, one of those would have been to reappoint Representative Justin Jones back to the State House, if you recall all of that. And then two other really big things for a vice mayor that cannot be left out. Number one, the vice mayor can become the mayor if the mayor were to die or step down, as happened in 2018. And the vice mayor can also cast a tie-breaking vote in the Metro Council in the rare circumstance that there is a tie on one of the voting matters.
All right.
That's the menu of vice mayor duties.
Okay, so they're running meetings. They're not out there doing ribbon-cutting ceremonies. It doesn't sound super interesting, but explain to us how and why are those responsibilities so important?
Sure, and I think the vice mayor is often out in the community too. But if you've ever been in a bad meeting, you know how a meeting without a purpose or a meeting that gets out of order. So let's not sleep on the meetings thing. So they're running the meeting. I think it really is a big thing. And keep in mind, these meetings can run for like 4, 5, 6 hours trying to make these decisions for the city. So I do think that running the meeting is a big deal. So they're the ones who are kind of banging the gavel. They're the ones calling on the council members when it's their turn to speak or cutting them off if they've run out of time. Same thing with the residents who come to speak. Anyone who has engaged with the council probably has the vice mayor's voice burned into their brain because you're hearing them throughout that meeting, keeping things running. And keep in mind, Nashville has this really big city council, 40 members. There's a lot of rules to follow. Robert's Rules of Order. Who gets to make a motion? When you're supposed to debate it? When is it time to take the vote? So yeah, it's running a meeting, but there's a lot at stake. And then there's also they're setting the tone. Is there room for some jokes, or is there a very serious matter in front of the city that they're going to kind of weigh in on? So yes, it's running a meeting, but it's a really important meeting twice a month.
Okay. I also imagine that they're attempting to keep the meetings run within a period of time. I heard that there was one that ran till 5:30 in the morning.
Well, yeah, there's been some record-setting council meetings in the last few years. I mean, that's partly the agenda's massive. I guess they have the throttle, whether they want to try to limit discussion any further. Of course, if you cut it off too soon, that's also unpopular.
Yeah.
So there is a balance, I think, between efficiency and hearing people.
Yeah. Howard, okay, so tell us, what is it like to become vice mayor? Was it a steep learning curve for you?
I was sitting here just kind of laughing listening, because everything you said is true, except it seems like the most boring, unassuming position to hold in government, listening to it. But the truth is, it's probably one of the most important positions in government. Becoming vice mayor is daunting. It's there's so much responsibility, and yes, you got 40 members of the council who are kings and queens of their districts, and you have to find a way to allow all of them to represent their areas in which they are looked at as the leaders, and but also do it in a way that provides respect to them, but in a way that works for the entire city. And to have people that are both responsible for their districts, but also responsible for creating legislation for the whole city, not just for the day, but also 10, 20 years from now, it requires a level of leadership and skill to be able to do that. And yes, there's no school, there's no classes you can take to become a successful vice mayor. And a lot of it is learned on the job, majority of it is. And you have a lot of systems in place that help you with your legal director next to you and other staff members. But you have to prep in between meetings to make sure that you're prepared, you have a game plan on every piece of legislation that you know is going to require a lot of discussion. You don't just get up in that chair and start running that meeting without having discussions with your legislation people and the council members to see where they're going with this legislation and what could be the roadblocks and the challenges to get this legislation forward. So the reality is the vice mayor works continuously to prepare for each council meeting, and so that they've got to have an idea before that legislation hits the floor on the nuances involved in that legislation. Mm-hmm. And when you first get there, if you've never been there, it's like, whoa. I mean, what have I gotten myself into? But the good thing about government and situations like this is they start repeating themselves. And a lot of the processes are processes that occur each meeting. And so you do become more efficient and proficient in the process, but you never know what's going to come forward and what's not going to come forward. So no, you don't get to vote unless it's a tie. But my goodness, to be able to get to that final vote requires a lot of maneuvering and leadership abilities that a vice mayor would have to have.
Okay, so I got a question for you. You have a close relationship with Metro Council members. You preside over the meetings, but what was your relationship with the mayor like?
Oh, the relationship with the mayor is not as important as the relationship is with the administration, the mayor's office. Of course, it would be great to have a great relationship with the mayor, but relationship and communication could be two different things. You and the mayor could be on different sides of an issue, but if you can still have communication, it allows you to be able to work through that process, because the council a lot of time votes on issues that are counter to what the mayor wants. But it's your job to ensure that however that vote goes, it does happen. So you still have to be able to communicate with the mayor's office. So it might not just be the mayor, it might be one of the staff members or liaison, but it's more important to have a relationship and a line of communication with the mayor's office than it is to just have a great relationship with the individual mayor.
Now, you mentioned before that the vice mayor casts a tie-breaking vote if the Metro Council is deadlocked. Can you tell us about a time that you had to break a tie?
Well, I've had to break a tie on about 3 or 4 different occasions. But I guess the most memorable one is the time that we had the sexual orientation bill, which, 10 years ago, I might not talk about it as freely, but right now, it is a good lesson, especially for a vice mayor or a person wanting to be a vice mayor. And that is that the bill was a good bill starting out. But as it went through readings, it started to become watered down. And so as vice mayor, it's my job to make sure a bill continues to move forward. But the city of Nashville became so incensed. You had people from Kansas City coming down with having bonfires out front, making just totally derogatory statements about people's sexual orientation. It just got ugly. And in the second reading, it was so ugly that they even were in the chambers and holding up signs, making derogatory statements, and had to be put out of the room. I was made privy to the fact that the bill was not going to pass on third reading, and people out of respect were, council at that time, the council really wasn't ready for that. And I was not one of those. But the fact is that knowing what I knew and seeing what I saw, I thought it was my job to just calm the city down and to end this. And on the second reading, it was a tie, and I voted against the bill. And of course, 50% of the people loved me for it. 50% of it hated me for it. And the truth is that I knew I couldn't win, but I really thought I was doing everybody justice by doing it. But as I've had time to reflect on it, people who bring legislation forward deserve to see the legislation go through. I would have hated if somebody had done that during the segregation and integration to kill the opportunity for me to be able to move forward as an African American. So the decision I made a leadership decision. I made a decision. I made a strong choice. But the fact is, if I had to do it over again, I would have allowed the bill to go into its third reading and fail. Just give it the respect that it was due. So that's my take on it. Another person might have a different take on it. I don't care. The fact is that this is my lesson, what I learned, and it's not always good because the vice mayor does have power on the council floor. You are the chairman of the council, and you do have power. You can cut the mics on, cut them off. It's more powerful than you think. And we got to be careful on when we utilize that power and why we utilize it. So, lesson to be learned.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's a valuable lesson for us all. Now, we have two candidates running for vice mayor. They're both going to be joining us in a few minutes. Jim Shulman is the incumbent. Tony, who is he, and what's his term been like?
Yeah, so Jim Shulman, he has worked for the state. He's been in and around government at a couple of levels. He's also worked for nonprofits, and he was a council member before he became vice mayor in 2018. Since then, as we all know, it's been kind of a hard time for the city. There's been some huge decisions to make, obviously some traumatic events, including for the council itself having to meet remotely during the peak of the pandemic. In terms of his term, I mean, he came in really saying he wanted to be a convener, someone who could get people who disagree kind of around the table to sort of chart an action path. That said, there's been a lot of division along the way. I mean, there's been some really contentious meetings. You can see something like divisions over like the stadium, the football stadium, divisions over taxation, the tax rate, that kind of thing. He came in with the convener idea. It's been a tough time, I think, for a lot of folks. The other thing I would point out, Jim Shulman made a point to create some special task forces to take up some really urgent issues that the city had. And I think that led to some pretty good research and to some new policy proposals as well.
Well, what about his opponent, Angie Henderson? Who is she? And what's she been saying about how she'd do things differently?
Yeah, so Angie Henderson, you'll get to hear soon as well. She's been a district-level council member. Before that, she worked in marketing, has also worked in fundraising for universities. On the council, I would describe her as being very fiercely independent, not afraid to take an unpopular stance or to be critical of a proposal from the mayor's office, for example. So you're going to know where she stands on a matter. She's also willing to take on really kind of complicated policy issues related to development, related to sidewalks. So I think that's kind of what's marked her term as a council member. And yeah, I think she's suggesting that there could be some new processes to make sure that council members know how the council and how Metro and how the mayor's office works. I think she wants to see council members better educated about the job they're going to do.
Now, Howard, the vice mayors generally remain neutral on policy issues, except in specific cases. When do you think it's appropriate for a vice mayor to weigh in on Metro Council decisions, and when is it better to be neutral? We have just over 2 minutes left.
Well, the vice mayor is never neutral. They show neutrality. You're going to have an opinion on every bill that comes forward, but you have to you cannot always speak on it or act on it. And the truth is, when it's the right time and wrong time, I don't know that there's a wrong time, but you just have to function within the council and within the governmental structure more so than functioning publicly and stating your positions publicly. So I won't, it's no textbook way of handling your positions other than the fact that your position should not be normally shown in a public way, only within the work that you're doing within council. Like, you need to get the budget passed. Mm-hmm. The budget needs to pass every time it comes forward. It would not be a good idea for the vice mayor to stand up and say, I'm not going to vote for this budget, or I don't think this budget should pass. If you don't like the budget, you need to be working that within the council and within the administration to help to get it to a place where it is something that you can agree with. But to take a public stand on it would probably be a wrong time if there's a wrong time.
All right. That is Davidson County Criminal Court Clerk Howard Gentry, who served as vice mayor from 2000 to 2007. He was joined by WPLN interim news director Tony Gonzalez. Thanks to you both for really explaining the value of this super important position. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here.
We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll meet the candidates running for vice mayor, incumbent Jim Shulman and Angie Henderson. Do you have a question for the candidates? If so, tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP, and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Citizen Nashville. Early voting ends this Saturday, and Election Day is just a week away. We know a lot of you have yet to cast your ballots, and that is totally okay. Nashvillians need to know everything possible about who to vote for and why. We are electing our city's leaders for the next 4 years, after all, y'all. Today, we're focusing on the vice mayor. And before the break, we heard about the duties of the vice mayor. Now let's meet the folks running. District 34 Council Member Angie Henderson is vying against incumbent Jim Shulman, who's been Nashville's vice mayor since 2018. Jim, Angie, thank you for being here. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Really appreciate it. So we're going to ask you questions, and to keep time, we're trying to make this as fair as possible. You've got 90 seconds to answer unless I say otherwise. Y'all ready?
We are.
Okay.
We're ready.
All right. To kick things off, let's start with what you want to do as vice mayor in this next term. You each have 2 minutes. Jim Shulman, we'll begin with you.
Well, and thank you for having us. And I thought Howard Gentry did an excellent job of kind of describing, the role of the vice mayor. There are obviously a number of issues still pending that the city is looking at. If you listen to the mayoral candidates, there are so many issues flying around Nashville, whether it's affordable housing or whether it's increase in crime, whether it's transit, whether it's infrastructure, overdevelopment. So there's going to be a number of issues going on within the city over the next 4 years. I think the idea is to make sure that our council members are, again, properly involved. There is good, adequate communication, that they are educated on these different issues that are flying around. And so the idea is to make sure that good communication is flowing, typically between the mayor and the vice mayor, and then the vice mayor to the council. The vice mayor can serve as a kind of a conduit between the mayor's office and the council. And as Howard said, doesn't necessarily mean that that the vice mayor is going to agree with everything that the mayor does, but the mayor brings a substantial amount of legislation. And I think part of the role of the vice mayor is to make sure that the push is on with the mayor's office and the departments and anybody else who's bringing legislation to make sure that the council members have adequate information before them and that they can make good sound decisions. And that's part of the role of the vice mayor.
All right. Thank you for that. Angie Henderson.
Thank you, Khalil. I'm running, I think, to bring a different perspective to this role, and I appreciate Mr. Gentry's perspective very much. That was great insight. I've served on the council for 8 years, and many of those years I have been chair of a committee where we do our legislative oversight. And so I feel that onboarding the council, making sure the council is well informed about how Metro government works, what our strategic plans have been. Folks really feel like things are out of alignment, both council members and the community. We've had 3 mayors in a time that we would typically have 1. We've had a lot of churn in leadership. And so I think it is very important that we organize the office to support council members in district service and make sure that council members have the information that they need, but also sort of level set around how we want to do this committee work. How do we ask good questions? How do we know that history? And I think there's a reason the vice mayor and the mayor don't run on the same ticket. The vice mayor does not carry the mayor's water. We're all on Team Nashville, right? We're all working towards, ideally, those same strategic goals. But we need the policy and the legislation aligned with our strategic plans and aligned with our budget. And so supporting council members in that committee work is so very important because we need to ask critical questions. We need to understand the history. So I'm running to do the work, I think, in a different and better way.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So what do you think Nashville's biggest challenge is going to be in the next few years? And how specifically can the vice mayor help address that challenge? Angie, you're up first.
So I think we need to get back on track with many of the things that we have been speaking about for almost a decade now. Transit, affordability, land use policy. And so we have several strategic plans that we have not fully implemented from a policy perspective. And so your city council is your legislative branch. We do need actionable, accountable, adopted strategic plans. I was the policy subcommittee chair for our walk and bike strategic plan. And many of the recommendations of that plan are things that I have brought forward. Tony alluded to that, some major countywide policy work. Davidson County is a very difficult place to do legislation because we're 526 square miles, urban, rural, suburban. So there's some real challenge in doing the work. And I think supporting council members, sharing that experience is important to focus on the policy piece.
All right. Thank you for that. Jim.
So obviously lots of issues, as we talked about before. I happen to believe at this point that the most important issue that this city is facing is school safety. Because of the things that have been happening in this nation and because of the Covenant School, I believe that the council has to, this new council has to immediately focused, and we've already been focusing. Councilmember Jeff Syracuse, who runs our public safety committee, had a series of 3 meetings to talk about school safety. He had one at Hillsborough High School. That issue alone is going to take a tremendous amount of work, working with the school board, working with Dr. Battle, working with the new mayor and the new administration. We have got to pay attention to it. We have got to keep an eye on that, and we have got to make sure that we are funding whatever is needed to deal with this issue. We have got to keep our kids safe. That's the number one issue. Other issues floating around, what I would say on those things is that the council has to deal with it, but we also have to be accountable to the city and to its taxpayers. And what I mean by that is if we're going to do programs, and we need to deal with these things, and so does the new administration, we need to find out what the resources are that are available to do these things. We need to make sure those resources are spent appropriately, and then we have to make sure that we measure the results of those things. So if we're giving out money to different programs...
That's time.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right, this next question is for Angie. It sounds like, you want to add a lot more work to your plate as vice mayor. You want to beef up the training new council to member service. Are you worried that you're spreading yourself too thin?
I'm not. I'm fortunate to be able to give this job my full professional attention, and it needs it. So Nashvillians pin so much of their hopes and dreams for their city on their mayor. And we have a strong mayor system. And, so that individual gets paid a kind of commensurate level, whereas the vice mayor, is about $4,000 more, I think, Jim, than a council member. So I think, $23,000 for council members, $27,000. Not everyone is able to give it the full professional attention, I would assert, in time, not when I or Jim might be in leadership. The city should look at that because you are leading the council office. It is, to Mr. Gentry's point, about process, kind of back of house. How are we supporting council members? How are we level setting about the work that we do? What are the expectations around that work? Asking good questions, sharing what the history is, supporting council members in their policy goals, and making sure those policy goals are aligned with our adopted strategic plans, right? Somebody needs to be a legislative convener and educator and supporter. You are in a mostly neutral position. It's about how we do the work and making sure the process is clear, transparent, productive. We don't need to create, all due respect.
All right, that's time.
Well,
thank you. Thank you very much. If you're just tuning in, this is Citizen Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. We're talking this hour with the candidates for Vice Mayor, Jim Shulman and Angie Henderson. You can tweet us your comments at This Is Nashville. Now, Jim, what's your response to Angie's assertion that there's more that can be done to help new council members?
Well, so we have an orientation at the beginning of the term. And last term at the beginning, we had 2 days of orientation. The first day was kind of the basic information. What does the staff do? We have a director of the council, and we have different people on that staff that do different things for council members. And we also went through the basic stuff about, what is the agenda going to look like? What are committees? How does all that work? The second day of orientation, we actually spent on issues. And I remember we had so many people that wanted to talk to the council. We gave a number of people about 10 minutes each to talk about a particular issue so that people would have some idea. The council members would have an idea about what issues they might be facing. I think it probably lasted too long. I'm not sure if we're going to do that this time. I think this time, and this would be if I'm reelected, obviously, I think we're going to focus more on how these meetings run, and what is it like to be a council member. I thought the issue stuff last time would be helpful, but I think we need to spend more time on making sure that the new council members particularly understand how we function. What is the information coming from the mayor's office? How do you take that information? How do you understand an agenda? And how do you make it all work?
All right. Okay, so Angie, you said you want to lead some important bills through City Council to make City Council more of a check on the mayor. What do you say to people who think that would be taking too much power as vice mayor?
Right. And so I'm not saying that I would lead those initiatives. Again, it is looking at our strategic plans, listening to council members about what their policy goals are, right? So I ran for office to elevate and expand sidewalk policy, safe streets policy. I assume and hope we'll have a strong cohort of those folks for our next council term. So it really is about supporting the work of council members. If you talk to this term council members, they feel insufficiently supported, insufficiently prepared. And so it really is about helping the body do the work. When you have a 40-member body with diverse interests, you've got to kind of see how people can work together to align those policy interests, to align those with our strategic plans and move things forward. You can't, as in current leadership, just, kind of willy-nilly. I just think you've seen us not be as productive, and the productivity has often relied on just the energy or motivation of a smaller cohort of council members, because district council members are underwater. We are barely keeping our head above water, and council members need some support. And when they are better supported, that helps citizens feel that their government is more responsive to them.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have a listener question for you, Jim. It says about the Titan Stadium deal, quote, why didn't you put the Titan Stadium deal on hold after the Covenant shooting?
So the stadium deal was actually underway long before the Covenant school shooting. Covenant school shooting was obviously a tragic thing for this city, and we're still dealing with that. The stadium itself, they started a special committee, was basically formed to study that started last fall. And so they had been spending a number of months looking at the stadium as it went through. There were discussions about how to deal with all these things that were going on. Obviously, Nashville has experienced quite a number of tragedies. But I don't necessarily control when these bills move. That's up to the sponsors of the bill. I know there's been discussion, particularly as the Speedway stuff has come up, about making sure that there was plenty of time to look at these pretty complicated deals. The stadium deal had been studied for many months before the Covenant school shooting. Again, Covenant school shooting, tragic for this city, and again, still dealing with it. But the process goes on, and I think there were discussions with the sponsors about whether we would keep talking about it. Obviously, we kept talking about lots of different things, but as I said, school safety is the number one issue facing this city.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with the candidates for vice mayor, incumbent Jim Shulman and councilmember Angie Henderson. Do you have a question for them? You still have time to send it in by tweeting us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Citizen Nashville. Today's episode is all about the vice mayor. There are two candidates running for the seat, and they've been kind enough to sit down with us and answer questions. Incumbent Jim Shulman and councilmember Angie Henderson, thank you both again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so let's get on to the rest of the questions we have for you. Again, each of you will have 90 seconds to answer, unless I happen to say otherwise. Now, I want to talk about online engagement. Jim, it's been a few years since you've updated your online presence, and being online isn't the only way to engage with your constituents, but nowadays it is an important one. How do you engage with Nashvillians?
So it's a good question. I think what we try to do is send out the agenda every meeting so people can actually look at it. We started a process working with a news station in town where we invite different council members every time we have a council meeting to actually talk through what's important on the agenda for that particular evening. In terms of trying to engage with people, basically, because I was a council member at large before this, so I've run citywide several times. What you do is you try to go to as many different things as you can. I learned a long time ago, because I used to work for state government, I used to work for the Speaker of the House, that you don't show up just at election time. What you do is you spend time throughout your term going to as many different places as possible. And Councilmember Henderson's right. It's a big city, a big area. So you got to go to Jolton, you got to go to Antioch, you got to go everywhere in between. And so over the last 4 or 5 years as vice mayor, try to be everywhere I can be to talk to citizens, to find out what are their concerns. And the special subcommittees that we started at the last term were a part of just listening to what citizens were concerned about. So it's staying in touch and engaging with people.
All right. Thank you. Angie, tell us, what's your approach to communicating with Nashvillians and keeping them up to date?
I think you have to be both in person and online, specifically because we are a 526 square mile county. Not everybody can get to every meeting. Having that engagement online is important. And, the current vice mayor has started a new Twitter account every time he's had a campaign. And then he doesn't use that Twitter account at all. And, journalists, community, folks are online. And so there really is an important educating role that council members and the vice mayor can and should do. So, yes, Jim does send one email with the agenda. He did do, to his credit, some nice kind of online interviews during the pandemic. But I think we have to be very intentional about our social media communication to engage and educate the citizens around all these processes. Government can seem very inaccessible and unapproachable. And so not everybody can get to a meeting, and that's really why I think we've got to be online. And I think I have had a productive and educating online experience or record, rather, in my district service.
All right. And this next question is for you both. Each of you has a lot of experience with Metro Council and how it works. What do people not know about our city government that you wish they knew? Angie.
I think I wish citizens knew how difficult the work is to do because we are hamstrung somewhat by state government in our ability to interact with each other collegially, just to talk about issues. So if I want to call up a colleague and say, hey, what do you think about, our stormwater regs? How are we going to update those next? I had an interesting conversation this week. As Metro has currently interpreted it, I think we've sort of painted ourselves into a corner because that conversation might result in policy. I can't call my colleague and talk about that. There's nothing that we're hiding, right? I would be very happy to publicly notice at 48 hours a coffee with my colleague to go and speak about, updating our stormwater regs. But it very much constrains us in our ability to build a rapport as a body around the policy goals that we have. And so the vice mayor can be that kind of thread and that glue, I think, among council members to get them talking to each other as appropriate. But, the hypocrisy of, state legislators not similarly constraining themselves, it is very difficult to do the work that we do. I can't send an email to a colleague and say, as interpreted by Metro presently, hey, look what they're doing in this other city. Isn't that interesting? We should learn something. That's why that online presence is so important, Khalil, because I can put that out into the universe. Okay. Colleagues see that and they know maybe this is something we can work on.
All right. Thank you. Jim.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things with, and obviously I've been in government, both local and state, for a long time. And I think the biggest problem is access by the citizens of Nashville and Davidson County. You saw that with the state as well. People not sure of how to get access to services or to find out kind of what's available. We have lots of different programs. You look at the trustee in terms of tax assistance and tax freezes, things like that. Trying to get information out to citizens and then get them to understand that these things are available, there are services available, and then to find ways to make sure that when people call in, they don't necessarily get the runaround. There are, I would also say that there are a lot of newcomers to Nashville and Davidson County, and a lot of people that don't necessarily, they use English as a second language. Some of those, so these are people who live in Davidson County who would like to be able to access services. And so the more we can get these things done in different languages to make people feel comfortable about their government, to make sure that people feel like we're approachable and they can certainly come to the council meetings and they can come to meetings that we have all across the city, they can get access to more services. So I think it's access. I think that's what it is.
All right. Thank you. If you're just tuning in, this is Citizen Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekolona. We're talking this hour with the candidates for Vice Mayor, Jim Shulman and Angie Henderson. Tweet us your comments at This Is Nashville. Another question for both of you. How will you impact the procedures and rules to enable the public to have more of a voice at Metro Council meetings? Jim.
So the state just passed a law that says we have to have public comment now at every meeting. And that's great. I'm pleased with that. When David Briley was vice mayor, he conducted a series of meetings countywide to find out better ways to get access from constituents, to find ways to get information. And so the council decided at that point to have public comment periods on the second meeting of every month, except for June when we passed the budget. So we set up a process where you could sign up in advance. You'd have 2 minutes to speak. And I think we reserved 10 spots. Again, you had to sign up in advance. You could not speak about anything on the agenda, which I always thought was a little strange, but I understood why, because it could get out of hand. So under the new law that the state has passed, we have public comment at every meeting. We can put some limitations on, but they can also individuals can talk about information that is on the agenda. And we also do it with our committees now. So the state has now passed this, and we will follow it. And what we need to do is make sure that people understand that they should take advantage of that. So what's disappointing sometimes is if you have 10 slots and only 2 people sign up. You need to make sure that people understand, make it easy for people to communicate, and let people know, everyone know in the city, that if they want to say something about what we've got, they can talk to us.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Angie.
So I think having public comment is very important, and I think citizens are often surprised that there are certain types of bills that do not have that. So I stood up for a public hearing and called for a public hearing on the Titan Stadium. That would not have happened without my stepping up to advance that. And to Vice Mayor's point about public comment that we had already established, it had not been very well utilized. But that goes back to kind of our earlier conversation about being online, being intentional. Why weren't people coming and using that opportunity? Were we being coordinated and constructive in making sure that was in every council member's newsletter? Were we putting it out on social media? We have to invite the community to engage with us online, in person, in committee. And part of what the vice mayor is doing is narrating the work. And I don't think current leadership has done a particularly good job in kind of speaking into the room what we're doing. Why is this happening? And I think we can do better.
All right, next question is for you, Jim. You say that civility is important to you. So how would you ensure that the workplace culture within our city government is positive and effective?
So I guess say it again, the workplace conduct in terms of...
workplace culture. How would you ensure that workplace culture within our city government is positive and effective?
So what we want to do is make sure that employees are treated well. There are certainly harassment policies and non-discrimination policies within metro government, so we make sure that is clear. Again, we don't oversee other departments. We have a council office that we don't necessarily control. We have a director of the council that runs that office and makes sure that those policies are done. So we always want to make sure that people are treated well and that there is no discrimination, no harassment, or anything like that. Same thing goes for anything that we might have any type of control over in terms of metro government. We're a great city. It's a great city to be in. Obviously, there are issues that we're dealing with, but we want to treat people fairly. And that gets into different things like how do you make sure that more minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses get to participate in a lot of the things that are going on, making sure that, again, we treat everybody fairly, everybody has access to the systems, people can participate in their government and feel like they're being treated well.
All right, thank you. Angie?
I think the question was about civility.
Yeah, the question for you I have is, what ideas do you have to create a new culture at Metro Council?
So I think what you've seen in our body is it is particularly divisive at this juncture. We're not all getting along particularly well. I think that does go to leadership. I don't think the vice mayor has a very strong record in this regard. You've seen that in his former leadership at Safe Haven. And I think you see that in the body. I think there are people that are concerned that the vice mayor picks favorites, can be petty. I think I was strongly motivated to run by colleagues asking me, left, right, center, returning colleagues, new colleagues. They want us to do better as a body. And so I don't think current leadership has fostered a productive culture. And so that is part of what motivates me to run.
All right, this question is for you both. Angie, please answer it first. Are you prepared to work with whomever wins the mayoral race? And how would you ensure that the working relationship is of benefit to the city?
Absolutely. I will work with whomever Nashvillians choose to serve as mayor. We are on Team Nashville, right? We have to work together. And so, again, as I mentioned at the start, we run on a separate ticket for a reason, for checks and balances and good governance. The mayor holds a lot of power in this city. And if the vice mayor just sort of abdicates that role and it's just sort of, nothing to see here, going along to get along, banging the gavel, cutting the ribbons, and not being intentional about the work, there absolutely is a wonderful synergy that can happen when a mayoral administration is well run and it is very clear who does what in that administration, who has what in their policy portfolio, how that is aligned with the strategic plans, and how council then comes alongside to say, these are the goals of this city and this administration. How are we going to do the policy work to get this stuff done? So I am a doer. I am a bridge builder. I'm not a bridge burner. I will work with whomever Nashvillians choose.
Jim.
So I think, I can work with anybody. And I think I've proved that over the 16 years I've been on the council. I know there's a lot of things being thrown at me right now, but I tend to get along with anybody. And I think you could probably ask most of the mayoral candidates who I've seen throughout this election cycle that, we all work together. I would say that, everybody tries to work together to make this stuff done. It's not easy. It hasn't been easy over the last 4 years. A lot of the divisiveness that you saw in Washington somehow managed to find its way down into the city council. It's a lot different than it used to be. And, when I was a district council member, council members kind of stood up for each other and worked very, very hard together. And there were disagreements, but you left them on the floor. it's changed over time, probably to some extent because of social media, where you don't leave it on the floor. You get stuff done, and then you go home, and then somebody has said something about you on social media. But vice mayor works very, very hard. It's a pretty tough job. And in my 5 years as vice mayor of the city, I have not cut a lot of ribbons. That's not what I do. It's a lot of work to get all this stuff done and get this agenda prepared and get it basically allow the council to do its business.
All right. I want to really thank you both for being with us. I want to thank the candidates for Vice Mayor, Jim Shulman and Angie Henderson. Thank you for coming onto the show and answering these questions. Nashvillians truly appreciate this.
All right.
Thank you so much.
And thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Char Daston. Our senior producer is Steve Harouche. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. The masterminds behind our theme music are Laurent and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Simone Boyd. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at thisisnashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Lake Alona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, and be good to each other.